Hello and welcome to the third subpool. Here we have all of the latest submissions that were received, but let's go ahead and get this started. Up first we have Command Execute up against Pi. Command Execute, you can see, is using these things, which are terrible missile monstrosities. I think there's some torpedoes in there too, some burst lasers, shields. Overall, hopefully this thing behaves itself pretty well, but it's going to be pretty vulnerable to AI shenanigans. Pi, on the other hand, is using spacers with a laser, because you gotta have a weapon. And what is this? Mortars and missiles, some torpedoes. There's another ship in here. This looks like something that Holorcer might design. It's a very Holorcer looking shape at the very least, which is not by any stretch a bad thing. But you can see the effect of the spacers and just how much more room Pi's fleet has to spawn. Spacers are a technology we haven't seen in a little while. A lot of people have just been kind of letting their ships clump up, which is fine for the most part, but sometimes you want your ships to have more room to maneuver. And you can see one of Command Execute's ships getting isolated out on the left side there. Could bode pretty poorly for him. But at the same time, they're very fast, and it's making Pi's fleet have some trouble keeping up. Also, the Attack on Sentinel thing, if you haven't seen Attack on Titan, it's a pretty solid TV show. You might want to check it out if you like animes. The Zap is the one to watch, this guy. And Pi takes round one. Moving in round two. Round one was pretty commanding lead. Although driving through a bunch of enemy missiles is pretty ill-advised in general. So this is the third subpool. The top two members of each subpool will be moving into a champion pool. When the champion pool is over is when I do a little extra fun stuff on the side. I want to get all the important stuff out of the way first. But the subpool and the champion pool will run faster than the last two pools, just because there are fewer participants. Yeah, I woke up tired. And Command Execute doing pretty well for himself this time around. We've seen heavy reliance of missiles in the past do both great and terrible, depending on the composition of the enemy. But in this case, it seems to be working out alright. Not entirely sure why the game is deciding to use the spacer for the thumbnail. I thought it went by point value, but it might go by size instead. Who knows? Who knows? Very highly mobile first round. Bunch of glass cannons everywhere. Tends to have a pretty neat side effect of ships just spontaneously combusting. And Pi takes the match. So up next we have Command Execute up against ToxicoWaste Incendio. So Toxico has decided to do some asymmetry here, which I'm okay with, but that's a lot of shields. I did not realize how many shields he put on that thing. I'd like to believe that that's going to work out well, but I feel like that probably won't. Shields are pretty expensive and not terribly potent. And this guy's got one of these. I think those are, yeah, proton beams. Toxico said that when he designed this ship, he made it so that it would look like the entirety of the fleet was just broken off from a single ship, which you can kind of see. Where these shield things look like they probably came from the front, and the rest of the body just other parts attached. I don't really know exactly how it would fit together. Kind of a neat idea though. But you can see the missiles just burrowing through. A lot of damage coming out of Command Execute's fleet. And for raw damage calculation, missiles aren't that efficient, but the fact that they track as well as they do tends to make them actually rather good weapons because they seldom miss. And as far as range goes, their balance of range and accuracy leads to them being one of the better long-range weapons in the game. Securing a nice solid second win, it looks like, for Command Execute. But you see what I mean about the shields? Despite as many shields as there were, it cut through them pretty quickly. But next we have Command Execute up against Dukeslayer. And Dukeslayer's ship has two designs in it. This thing, which has a bunch of guns and spins. And this thing, which has a couple of guns and rams. This was Duke's splash-proof rammer design. So we'll see how that actually holds up. He was talking about it quite a bit in Discord. But you'll notice his rammers are considerably slower than Husk's were, and a good bit larger as well. And Dukeslayer's fleet appearing to have a bit of a problem here. Command Execute's guys are fast enough that they're generally able to keep away from the rammers, and certainly able to keep away from the brawlers. Meanwhile, Command Execute has every advantage when it comes to range. Although sometimes the AI makes unusual choices and decides to go crashing into melee spikes. Which is giving Dukeslayer the point lead. I don't know that Command Execute's going to be able to make up that point gap in the time that he has left. But not for lack of effort. And for the most part, it actually seems like Command Execute has the advantage. He just is getting messed with by the AI. And Duke will be taking round 1 on points. All because of stuff like that. And now moving in round 2. And you can see the colossal speed difference between Duke's rammers and husks. Although Dukes seem to track targets better, but in the case of fast things like Command Execute's fleet, they just can't catch up. And here's where you can start to see the problems with the Terran missiles. You'll notice that one of Command Execute's ships has been firing at Duke's for quite some time, but Duke's ship doesn't appear to have lost any armor yet. The missiles are very good against fragile targets, and they're very good at applying consistent damage, but against a target with a lot of durability, it takes a lot of missiles to actually get any progress. And it's looking like Duke's going to take the match. Up next we have Command Execute up against Owlfeathers. It's been a little while since we've seen Owlfeathers, and he's doing something a little different for us this time. You can see his ships are still gorgeous, but he's gone a little crazy with the hyperstacking. He said that the lore of this faction is that they have they've unlocked the key to manipulating subspace or something like that, and as a result they know how to compress matter into spaces where it shouldn't fit. And so if you were to walk around inside one of their ships, you would see crew members just appearing and disappearing seemingly at random because space doesn't fold correctly inside their ship. We'll see how that works out though. I still really like the aesthetic of them. But the these missile vomiters from Command Execute seem to be able to get the job done pretty well. These ships seem to be a little bit on the fragile side, which is exactly the environment that Command Execute wants. And yeah, there's probably hyperstacking on every single fleet in this pool, if not every single ship. It wouldn't surprise me. But it looks like round 2 is also going to be going in favor of Command Execute. And this is basically one of the worst case scenarios for Outfeather's fleet, in that his ships are relatively fragile, and Command Execute has the perfect weapon for dealing with fragile ships, and also has the speed advantage, so Outfeather's ships can't escape either. But Command Execute secures himself another win, and next up we have Splinter against Command Execute. So here we have Desmond the Deadly Diamond and his Fireflies. The Fireflies seem to be not unrelated to S&W's flies in the past. And Desmond the Deadly Diamond, you can see, has more than enough proton swords to make a grown man tremble, and a few plasma torpedoes, a lot of forward momentum too. So depending on how this guy who's stuck inside Desmond ends up going, this could be interesting. It's also worth noting, originally Splinter was going to be building a farmer fleet for this tournament, but ended up scrapping it like 2 days before the tournament and switching to Terran instead, which is what led to Desmond the Deadly Diamond. And yeah, Desmond has gone the way of the befriend. So now it looks like we're going to see Fragile Ships versus Command Execute's fleet again, which in the past has gone very well for Command Execute's fleet. And yeah, almighty alliteration always alleviates ailing some things. I ran out of words, apparently. Yeah, if Desmond had managed to get his hands on one of these ships, I think it would have gone down very quickly. But Desmond instead got missiled pretty early and kind of spun out and didn't know what to do. Desmond has 2 Fireflies stuck in him in the beginning of this one. Splinter, what did you do? That's not something we usually see with Terran fleets. He lived fast, he died fast. He was Desmond, the Deadly Diamond. Desmond seems to be having a hard time tracking, too. He's kind of spending most of his time just turning around in circles until he gets caught by a missile volley. Hey, Desmond got one. Jesus. Let's get at him with a drive-by. Alright. Have a good night, Clem. Take it easy. Thank you for joining us. And Desmond wins the second round. Because let's be honest, this is Desmond's show, not the Fireflies. Actually, what is the name of the guy in Assassin's Creed, in the earlier ones? Desmond's having a pretty bad day. Not a lot of Desmond left. I thought half the point of Ralph, though, was to be very inexpensive. And Splinter takes round 2. So up next we have Pi up against ToxicoWaste Incendio. Pi having a pretty significant speed advantage. And as long as, I think it's Zap is the big one. As long as Zap gets free reign, I think it'll do a pretty good job of taking apart basically anything. So what you're saying is Desmond attack, but he also protect and distract. I mean, you're supposed to hate memes, that's the point. There's no meme that isn't hated by at least one person. That's why they spread, is because people hate them. And now we've got Pi up against Dukeslayer. Pi has a pretty big speed advantage here. And despite being mortar proof, the rammers don't seem to be antimatter proof, which might be a bit of a problem for Dukeslayer. I think in the previous rounds he always, or nearly always, had a point advantage. Whereas the Zap from Pi seems to be doing a good job of destroying Dukeslayer's stuff. Just running in his sandbox, kicking over his sandcastles. You know. Although that said, Dukeslayer very suddenly gained a bunch of points. I'm guessing he caught out some of the other ships from Pi. Still a pretty narrow gap. I lost sight. Is this Zap? Yeah, that's Zap. I'll record your grudge match flat paste and I'll put it on YouTube since I've got like the gauntlet being cast. But yeah, this is a pretty narrow point gap. Normally I'd be inclined to say that Pi is probably going to get this one, but Dukeslayer's fleet's already turned around this kind of point gap once. Have a good one, Flatface. Thank you for joining us. And Pi takes round one. Get him with the bullets. You didn't send the splash-proof ones, Duke? After talking them up? And Pi off to another really good lead here. As long as the AI continues to behave, Pi will be fine. But Duke is bringing a lot of antimatter cannons. Those look pretty comfortably in Pi's favor here in round 2 as well, though. And there it is. Pi takes the match. So up next we have Pi against Alfeathers. I'm feeling like this one's probably going to go in Pi's favor as well. With the speed and the Alpha Strike out of Zap, I don't know that there's much Alfeathers' fleet can do. Except hope to kill Zap first, but Zap kind of hid in the beginning and came in a little later. The railguns in that big ship from Alfeathers, though, are scary as hell. Imagine they're actually going to punch through some of the brawlers pretty effectively when they get the chance. So that is a lot of railgun fire. And actually, that railgun ship might kill Zap if Zap doesn't stop fucking around. Nope. Pi got him. And yeah, I was watching the halo colors. Pi's fleet has a gray halo and Alfeathers has that like magenta or whatever the hell color that is. Yeah, Zap is down. Ah, Splinter. In your next fleet, one of your ships needs to be named Cody, so I can yell Cody's down. It's important to me. And if you've seen, you've seen Frisky Dingo, or if you haven't seen Frisky Dingo, I highly recommend that as well. If you liked Archer, chances are very good you'd like Frisky Dingo. But it does look like Zap's other ships, the Zip part, is apparently going to earn a win for Pi here. I think at one point, Duke, you were in basically every pool, but you kept resubmitting, and that, you know, pushes you to the end of the line. But now we have Pi up against Splinter. As we saw in chat earlier, Pi's pretty confident about his odds here. And Desmond does seem to have some fragility-based concerns. But those proton swords, doing work. And yeah, basically, welcome to the abuse pool, where people are just abusing everything in the game engine, in one way, shape, or form. And it looks like Zap is down. And Splinter takes round 1. And yeah, this is still the abuse pool, but it is less abusive than abuse pools in the past. And I like that the spacer is maneuvering. It's good to know. Desmond's down. But yeah, the abuse pool usually gives birth to things like the Herald of Dawn and the Pulsar frigate. The bullets were, I think they were in the abuse pool too during that tournament. And looks like Pie's going to take a very solid round 2. So as we can see, this one pretty well hinges on whether or not Desmond dies early. Because if Desmond lives, then he gets those proton swords on target and just tears things apart. But if Desmond dies, then, you know, he doesn't do that. And Zap missed Desmond. This is about how it played out in the first round. Or at least a bit more how it played out in the first round. I'm not sure of the specifics. Desmond shedding his outer ring. Molting, if you will. Just ruined a ship. I wonder if Desmond realizes how much of an asshole he is. Oh, Desmond knows, and he revels in it. Ah, right. I would expect nothing less from the lead singer. So now it's just Zap against Desmond and several of the deadly Fireflies. I like that the inner pod disconnected and started bouncing around inside the chassis. Desmond, a multi-stage ship. Because I think that'd be pretty amazing too. Yeah, if Desmond gets a hold of Zap for just a split second, that's all it takes. But the charge in is going to be pretty scary. And there it is. Splinter takes the match because Desmond got his filthy mittens on Zap. So up next we have ToxicoWaste Incendio up against Dukeslayer. Now these fleets are a bit slower than what Duke had been up against in the past, so I feel like the rammers are going to be much more useful here. And Duke takes round one. And I would be surprised if round two went a whole lot different. Round one was pretty dominant. And Dukeslayer wins the match. So next we've got Toxico up against Feathers. I feel like Feathers has a solid advantage here too. The railgun ship is really going to be able to come into its own. Against the slower moving targets, the railgun shots are going to be more precise instead of being all fanned out. And that's going to let it punch through armor and shields very effectively. As you can see, just drilling a line through Toxico's ship. The Terran railguns do pack quite a bit of a punch. There's no reasoning with Desmond. Desmond just is. And Feathers takes the round. You can sort of see the torpedoes streaking into the station shield. Yeah, Desmond would have a thing for Sentinels. Filthy monster. And Feathers takes the match. So next up we have Toxico up against Splinter. I don't know how Desmond's gonna do here. Although apparently it's well, I suppose. But you said you removed that outer lining from Desmond and then he just didn't do well anymore? Yeah, Feathers, his fleet is actually pretty nasty, it's just a little soft, and he was up against a lot of missiles before. You know, missiles and soft targets. Desmond is an enigma. Proton swords. How many proton swords does Desmond have, actually? Is it like 8? Something like that? Yeah. No, I was thinking about what would happen if you added a second Desmond, but apparently that's a detriment. There is no explaining Desmond. And up next we have Dukeslayer against Feathers. I feel like this one's probably going to go in Dukeslayer's favor. Feathers ships are a bit on the slower side, so the melee ships are going to be more dangerous, and a bit on the fragile side, so the brawlers, when they do get their hands on something, it's not going to last long. Some say each Firefly is a spirit of a farmer who died to a Sentinel. Yeah, I think it's the coalesced spirit of several dozen farmers for each Firefly. I'm like 90% certain that Splinter's just making this up as he goes. I don't think any of this was pre-created. I think he's just going with it. And Dukeslayer takes round 1. And with the way the first round went, I wouldn't be surprised if this one went about the same. The fleet from Dukeslayer, I think, just has too many advantages. And the railguns, punchy as they are, farmer armor, or sentinel armor is just too much. So between Desmond and the farmer development, you're not the same man you were a month ago. A special kind of demented now. Woo. And Moshi, I see you in chat. You submitted under Ludoshi before, right? So what you're anticipating then, Splinter, is some destruction? Yeah, his name in chat is Epmoshi, which I think was Ludoshi's name in Reassembly. Twitch names and Reassembly names and all that don't necessarily go together. So now we've got Dukeslayer up against Desmond and the Fireflies. Let's see how the pure distilled hatred that the Fireflies harbor ends up panning out. Desmond does seem to have an affinity for hugging melee spikes, though. But he's keeping a bunch of ships busy, serving as a pretty good distraction. Puns are love, puns are life. Duke building up a pretty significant early game lead, though. Don't know if Splinter's going to be able to recover. Duke's fleet generally hasn't given up a lot of points in the past. Mostly because they have rather high HP to everything else ratios. They don't really have vulnerable ships in the fleet. Everything is kind of this round, armor-covered mess. And with Desmond now down. Apparently Desmond was over half of Duke's points by himself. Very slowly creeping up the scoreboard though from Splinter. Now that Desmond is down and everything's kind of spaced out, you can see Duke's point gain is dramatically slowed. But he did build up enough gap that Splinter's not going to be able to recover it before the timer in round 1 at least. Desmond trying his absolute damnedest though to kill that rammer. And I think he got it. It's time for Desmond to be a superhero. Or get cut in half. One of the two. I'll leave that at your discretion. Yeah, my timing is masterful. Yeah, that does actually happen quite a bit. So as long as the AI doesn't mess up, he should be alright, and then the AI charges into melee. Just, well... Pretty good fight though going on between these two. Not a lot of points in general being given up. I think a lot of that owes to the fact though that the Fireflies are fast enough that Dukeslayer's fleet's having a hard time catching them. Were it not for Desmond, Splinter would actually be winning right now. So I guess that's beautiful irony, I guess? I don't know. Ever since that song, I'm not entirely sure what irony is anymore. And Duke takes round 2. And up next we have Owl Feathers up against Splinter. I'm feeling like Desmond might be a bit of a problem for Owl Feathers' fleet. The proton sword's there. Some scary shit. Oh, is it a 3-way tie? Because I really hope it's not going to be a 3-way tie. Those are annoying. If it's a 3-way tie, I look at how it goes. So, say you've got A, B, and C, but if A beats B and C, A goes in, and then whoever won between B and C goes in. If each one is 1 win, 1 loss, then in the past I've put it up in a straw poll. Splinter does look like he's going to take round 1 pretty significantly though. Look at Desmond just creating problems. Desmond is a terrible person. Have a good night, Dalek. It's just Desmond just it's like a muscle car with, you know, stock tires. It's miserable. Ah, you people. Alright, so we'll see who's going to be joining us in the champion pool. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.